Hi, everyone. Hello. Thank you for joining us today. This is a very special edition of our Roundtable series. I am Dr. Carmen Gonzalez. I'm a professor at the University of Washington and the director of our Center for Communication Difference and Equity. And this session today was completely produced by our undergraduate students who are learning about how to do community engaged work, to collaborate with folks outside of the university, and to speak to different kinds of audiences. So I'm very excited to introduce this panel today. Our awesome PhD candidate and CCDE researcher, Dr. Julie Feng, is behind the scenes helping our students coordinate this roundtable. And we are just very grateful to Julie for being such an innovative teacher and helping our students get this hands-on experience. So welcome. Our Health Equity Action Lab focuses on community engaged public scholarship work in the area of health and well-being. And this topic is very near and dear to our heart. So we're very excited to have folks who are willing to talk about this with us. With that said, I am going to hand it off to our brilliant team who's been working hard all quarter to produce this. Our moderator, Chloe, will start us off.
Hi, I'm Chloe. I'm a second-year student at UW studying Communication and American Indian Studies. And I'm really excited to welcome two panelists from the University of Washington to discuss queer mental health. We're joined by Lila, the co-director of programming for the Queer Student Commission, and Dr. Frizz, an assistant professor of rhetoric of health and medicine. I think your work aligns very well with the goals of the Health Equity Action Lab. So I'm also eager to hear your thoughts, especially as a queer person myself. So thank you for being here. And Lila, if you want to start by telling us more about who you are and what your work is about.
Yeah, so hi, my name's Lila. As you can see, I'm the Queer Student Commission co-director of programming, and the Queer Student Commission is a entity within ASUW, which is the undergraduate student government on the UW Seattle campus. QSC is one of many commissions within ASUW. But yeah, I'm an undergrad. I'm a second year. I'm studying communications and cinema and media studies, actually.
Awesome, thank you. And then Dr. Frez, if you want to share a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello all, I'm Dr. Frizz, use she, her pronouns. As Chloe mentioned, I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Communication, and I'm also an associate director for the CCDE and HEAL. And so my research focuses on rhetoric of health and medicine, so looking at the ancient art of persuasion as it's applied to health contexts. And in particular, I study health activists, so folks who are trying to make changes in health in the public sphere. So whether that's at public health levels or individual interpersonal interactions. And so I'm excited to be here as well and to be talking through queer mental health as a lesbian myself. The issue of mental health and queers is near and dear to my heart. So I'm excited to be here.
Great, thank you. I'm happy to have you both here. And also, if you're watching us live, please add your questions in the chat. We have someone backstage helping us manage your questions. So we'll have a Q&A portion at the end. Awesome. So we're going to start this off with a quick activity. I'll have both of you write a word, share it at the same time, and then we'll have a short discussion. So what's the first word you think of when you hear health equity?
All right. Do we share our words?
Yes. If you're ready, go ahead.
I put down meeting. And Chloe?
I put down opportunity.
Yeah, and so I put down meeting because for me, health equity is about meeting people where they're at And I almost put down at as my word because I think that that's a pretty important part of it as well. But a lot of the origins of conversations around health equity began in thinking about urban and rural divides. And if you're in a rural area and all of your doctor's appointments and treatments and medications are all available in the urban centers, and you have to travel to access any of those things, it becomes really difficult to have any kind of equity when it comes to health. But the idea has really uh, evolved past just the geographic context, and to also think about meeting people where they are with their own individual health. So rather than a doctor or physician telling someone what that here's what they need to do, that their body is wrong, and here's what they need to do instead to take care of their body. We see a lot of that narrative from like wellness gurus on social media now. Instead, it's about listening to patients and communities to hear what they need, and then trying to deliver those resources to meet them where they are at by themselves.
I totally agree with that too. The word that I chose was opportunity because I think to me, health equity means equal opportunity for everyone to access the healthcare that they desire and that they need. Specifically, this includes equal opportunity for queer, trans, gender nonconforming folks who in the past typically haven't necessarily been included in healthcare. And so it's important to remember to think about the fact that queer and trans people need the same healthcare as straight cis people, and any that goes for any marginalized group. I think it's important to train healthcare individuals on the different needs of different groups of people, and I think that's really what equity means. Um, is yeah, supporting the different needs of different groups of people, and again, yeah, meeting them where they stand, meeting them where they come from.
Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing that. And Dr. Frizz, I think that was super interesting, the difference of urban and rural areas, especially since I study American Indian Studies. It's totally a big aspect in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know you two had kind of hit this in the last question, but if you want to expand a little bit more, just why is discussing queer mental health important to you? And we can start with Dr. Frizz as well.
Yeah, sure. So I want to start just by saying that mental health and wellness are deeply connected to social wellness. We tend to think about these as individual things, and we often talk about like different arrangements of chemicals, neurochemicals in our brains, which is also important at an individual level. But socially, social wellness is a huge piece of this, and it's supremely rational to feel anxious and depressed in a dysfunctional, dystopian society. So if there's something wrong with our social fabric, we're also going to feel it with our mental health and wellness. And today, much of the dystopia is intentionally aimed at vulnerable groups in the hopes that privileged groups will ignore the dysfunction that's surrounding us. And so we can point to these vulnerable groups. Certainly immigrants, people of color, and especially trans people are the biggest targets of these attacks. And I want to then say that attacks on the trans community are also attacks on all of us, that these form these wedges that enable more control of authoritarian power. So as a cis female lesbian, what that means, if you're not familiar with some of that terminology, cis means that I was assigned female at birth. And as I have grown into adulthood, that assignation still feels resonant with my identity. But as you can see, I do love to rock a dapper tie and a vest, and I love being able to play with my gender presentation in this way. But attacks on trans people are expanding out not just to people who identify as trans, but to anyone who seems to be not conforming to very narrow, rigid, hegemonic definitions of gender in order to police everyone in how we express ourselves and what we find pleasure in. So I think it is important to talk about attacks on trans people, and to also recognize some of the ways that mental health for queer people is also about mental health for everyone, and that when we make worlds that make everyone feel safe and included and able to be who they are authentically, we make society more functional for everyone too. So it's a really important topic just from the social organizing perspective.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was a great answer. That's hard to follow up, but I'll talk more on the individual level. I'm also a lesbian. I've been queer my whole life. I've struggled with mental health myself, but I've also watched everyone around me, my friends, my peers, specifically queer people, really struggle with mental health. And so I think it's really important to talk about queer mental health, and talking about it is the first step to helping people with mental health problems, and also just to raise awareness and destigmatize mental health, especially for queer people. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that talking about it is so crucial. And that's also one of the things that's been really heartwarming as I've grown older, because I can remember when I was younger, no one talked about mental health. It was to be seeing a therapist was like a stigma, and people like did not want to share that they were seeing therapists. And nowadays, you young people are sharing all the time, like, oh, well, my therapist told me I should think about this. And I love that, because it's really destigmatizing accessing resources that can help us to better cope with these dystopian times.
Awesome. I love that we have 3 lesbians on the live today. It's so awesome. Yeah, I definitely, again, just finding resources, being a queer person in college, I've really struggled to find communities that are built for other queer people in Seattle. And so I guess I was just curious, have you used any resources, on or off campus specifically for queer people?
I'll start with that. I personally haven't used mental health resources on or off campus specifically for queer people, but I have a couple that I want to highlight because I know about them. Um, I would say the Q Center, which is located in the hub on the 3rd floor. I don't know the exact number, but it's pretty obvious when you walk by the door. It's a great space. It's open pretty much every day of the week except the weekends, and you can just go in, you can hang out, you're surrounded by other queer people. They have a library, you can check out books, a lot of queer books, like hundreds of books. It's incredible. They have a lot of free resources, like menstrual resources. They even have blue books and just like resources for exams, stuff like that. And they host events as well, and they have really important programs, such as Engender, which is their version of gender affirming care. And as a UW student, you can request and get one gender affirming care item from that program every quarter completely for free. And they have items like binders, T-tape, etc., like really, really important and sometimes expensive and hard to access items. And I think that's a super important resource for anyone on campus. Additionally, I'd like to highlight Husky Health. QSC recently hosted a gender affirming care panel, actually. And so we got to talk with Dr. Kaufman, who's the medical director of Husky Health. And she was telling us all about the trainings and such that all the providers at Husky Health are required to go through these days, specifically so that they can learn how to meet the needs of queer and trans patients. And I think that's really important, and something to think about when you're choosing a medical care provider. And from my knowledge, Husky Health is a pretty inclusive, pretty accepting space for that. Also, the counseling center, specifically for mental health concerns. The UW Counseling Center is very good. I know people who have used it, and they have individual and group counseling. They offer a lot of unique mashups and varieties of counseling strategies. But also, very importantly, they have Let's Talk, which is drop-in counseling. So you don't have to go through all the hassle of making an appointment, all important stuff, but definitely things that can be a barrier to accessing healthcare, especially counseling. So if you're interested, I would definitely look up the UW Counseling Center. And I wanted to mention those services are all free to students, specifically at the counseling center, not at Husky Health. That's a different story. But at the counseling center, you can go talk to people completely for free, talk to professionals. It's an incredible resource on campus.
Nice. Well, as a faculty member, I tend to utilize fewer on-campus resources, although I do want to shout out the Queer Staff and Faculty Affinity Group. I do go to their events, and they're actually having a meetup tomorrow night at Stoop Brewing on Capitol Hill, 6 to 8 p.m., March 12th. So it's always fun just to gather around with other queer faculty and kind of talk about things facing the university from our perspective. But a lot of the queer community that I find off campus, again, like finding that socialization and finding places where you can fit in and you feel free to be your authentic self, where you are affirmed and where you belong. That's so crucial to staving off the depression and sort of the challenges of these dark times. So I'm a big fan of sports leagues or other groups that are around activities, because I feel like it's a little bit easier to socialize if there's something going on. It's not just like sitting and looking at someone. I'm a member of Rainbow Rec. I play dodgeball and pickleball through them. So you don't have to have any athletic skill to just show up and get hit by a dodgeball. But then you get all the benefits of the social aspects. Some other groups that do similar things, Queer City Sports, Social Queer, Gay City. Actually, I think now they're called Seattle's LGBTQ plus center, but they were called Gay City. And so a little bit like some of the Q Center on campus, but for Seattle. And I also just want to shout out queer bars, that you don't have to be someone who drinks or stays out late to go be part of bar culture, but just sitting and being in like a third space where other queers are going to show up and where you can just like strike up a conversation, make a new friend. Being out in the real world is so much better than trying to meet people online. If you aren't sure where the queer bars are in Seattle, Wild Rose and Lumber Yard in Capitol Hill are great. Pitch the Baby, I think, is also on Capitol Hill. They're a new sports bar. Rough and Tumble is a women's sports bar. And then Dreamland in Fremont is also a really great one. And they have drag shows, drag brunch on the weekends. So go out and find those social activities, whether it's like sports, drag, chilling around, talking politics. Find those spaces where other queers are at. And that's a great place to start forming your community off campus.
Chloe, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I was just saying I'm like fangirling behind the screen, Dr. Frizz, because Dreamland, I'm obsessed with that and the drag brunches they do. And yeah, the Queer Center, I just went there for the first time. And I think these are really awesome resources that, if anyone watching hasn't checked out, they should definitely give at least one of these a try. Anyway, so yeah, I'm glad that there are a bunch of resources, that you guys have been able to find, but I also wanted to ask if you've had any struggles with finding resources, because I know sometimes it can be difficult.
I'll just jump in as like a faculty that, yeah, the UW is huge. And so it can be really overwhelming to try to find your place on it. I joined this campus 5.5 years ago in 2020. So first off, pandemic is a horrible time to try to acclimate to a new place. But I feel like it's taken me all of these years to finally find my feeding around the resources on campus. So I can imagine that as a student, you're probably going to be here for about 4 years. You might just start to find your resources and your community by the time you're a senior. And so that can be really hard and feel isolating, that it takes time to build those connections.
Yeah, same thing. I know I've felt very overwhelmed in the past with trying to find resources because UW is such a big school, which is great that there are so many resources, but yeah, it's definitely overwhelming and hard to figure out, which you actually want to use or check out. I would say I didn't actually know about most of the resources that I know now until I got this job, and now it's my job to know these resources and to work with these different places, which is great. But for the average student, I don't think it's very accessible to just quickly find resources. I know there's like over 1,000 RSOs. So if you go on Husky Link trying to find RSOs, there's 1,000 options for you, which again is great. But I think checking out very specialized websites. I'm trying to word this right. Like, for example, if you go to the ASUW website and look at the Queer Student Commission page, there are lists of queer resources there. So being very specific in your search for resources is important so that it doesn't get really overwhelming.
Awesome. I also had a question. Are there any resources you wish were on campus for UW students? I was just thinking of something like queer LLCs or something in that vein.
I can go. I do think, I'm trying to think. There might be not a queer LLC, but I think there is queer housing. I should know this. I'm trying to remember from when I applied into housing. But definitely something like that would totally make sense. I think more resources specifically geared towards queer students is important because there's so many resources, but a lot of them are more general, which is great again. But mental health resources specifically for queer students, off the top of my head, I can't think of any, again, specifically for queer students, and I think that would be really beneficial to have.
Yeah, I don't. It's hard to say because I'm not sure that I have a comprehensive knowledge of all of the resources. So it's possible that we might have some of these and I just aren't aware of them. But I think some more specifically about sex ed and doing more with comprehensive sex education. And I think that's something that all students, no matter your gender or sexuality, everyone would benefit from having more access to those kinds of resources. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. This is a question specifically for Lila. I was just starting to think about it as you were talking about resources on campus. You had kind of talked about a little bit of what the Queer Student Commission does. Are there any favorite events you've hosted or any upcoming events you have?
Yeah, I'll go over what QSC does again really quick. So like I said, we're a branch or an entity within ASUW, and that means that QSC is consists of me, the co-director of programming, and my other co-director named Jenna, who couldn't join us today, but she's the co-director of policy. And so her work I'm less familiar with, but she works within the Student Senate and also within the state legislature sometimes to propose legislation protecting uplifting queer people on campus, which is super important. And then we both collaborate on the programming, which is, I would say, our main focus, especially this year, is putting on events that are fun, some that are educational, some that are advocacy based. For example, what have we done? We've done craft night. We just did craft night in the Q Center last week. It was great. It was make your own carabiner, which was awesome. We've done the gender affirming care panel. We did a Trans Day of Remembrance educational panel. The list goes on. We did queer prom in January, which is one of our legacy events, which means we do it every year. And again, it's about creating a safe, fun space or oriented towards queer students, creating events where queer students can go and take the weight of the world, the country off their shoulders for a little bit, have fun with fellow queer students, engaging with queer media. I'd like to highlight an event that our biggest event we have coming up in spring quarter on April 15th, which is our drag show. And we do it every year. This year, I think is going to be especially fun, not just because I'm the one planning it, but I think it's going to be great. We have 10 different drag queens performing, all from the greater Seattle area. The lineup is coming soon. Keep an eye out for that, but I'll tell you, it's very exciting. Our headliner was on Drag Race. I'm very excited to meet her. I'm very excited to host this show. It's in the Hub Lyceum on April 15th.
You've got to name the headliner.
Okay, I'll name it. Okay, Irene the Alien is our headliner, and it's free admission for students and
faculty.
Faculty, you can kind of bring anyone you want. It's not shut down. We're not checking IDs or anything, but yeah, so you should come. But it's going to be great. Yeah, completely free. We're catering food. Keep an eye on our Instagram, which is ASUW QSC, for more. And also we'll be putting posters and stuff around campus, but that hasn't happened yet, but I'm already going to say that's my favorite event that I've hosted.
Nice.
I'm so excited for Irene the Alien. Thank you for sharing that. I can't wait to go to that event. And yeah, the Carabiner event I went to, I think, your commission holds really awesome events and is a great resource to any queer students on campus. I also wanted to shift gears a little bit, and Dr. Frizz, I have a few questions for you specifically. Another thing I think, queer people struggle with is the lack of representation in healthcare. And with your background in rhetoric, how do you think the language and narratives around health and medical science kind of influence the mental wellness of young queer people?
Yeah, such a great question. And absolutely. I mean, so when we're thinking about rhetoric, we're thinking about modes of persuasion and symbolic action. So ways of using symbols, either visual or verbal, to do things in the world. And so words like sick or unwell or healthy, that these are words that do work in the world. And for a good portion of the 20th century, to be gay, to be queer, to be trans was a mental illness, was labeled unwell. And so that certainly enabled a lot of really horrible treatments to try to make people not be themselves, and to conform with rigid ideas of what wellness looks like. And so through a lot of really brave activism through the 20th century, and we can point to various different movements, both within psychiatry and psychology, also within the gay liberation movement, we've seen a lot of enormous change. I mean, folks who were organizing in the 80s and 90s around AIDS could not have fathomed that by 2015 we would have nationwide gay marriage. I mean, it just the change that we've achieved in this short time is phenomenal. But I think we also forget some of the like everyday ways that some of that change is still still trying to come, like some of the everyday interactions where the representation really matters. So one thing that like I thought of about this topic was when I was back in Wisconsin and getting some sort of like health physical, and the physician asked me, you know, all those typical questions that you get asked in a doctor's office. First day of your last menstrual cycle. Are you sexually active? Are you married? And you know, all these kinds of things. And then, are you pregnant? And so I was like, no, I'm not pregnant. And the physician was like, well, but you said that you are sexually active, and I don't see that you're on birth control. So like, are you using condoms, or how are you sure you're not pregnant? And then I was like, I'm a lesbian having sex with other people who also can't get me pregnant. Like we aren't having sex in a way that can get pregnant. But this physician was really like very close to ordering a pregnancy test and other kinds of verifications, because he did not want to believe that I knew my body and that I also knew what kinds of risks were coming from the sexual practices that I was engaging in. So having representation, I really think that if I'd had even a gay man, but certainly if I'd had another lesbian or a non-binary person or a trans person as my physician, I think they would have taken my word for it when I said, yeah, I know I'm not pregnant. So representation really matters, especially because we bring these narratives about what does it mean to be sexually active? What does it mean to be in a relationship? We bring those narratives into all of the spaces that we inhabit. And so certainly physicians bring them into the examination room. And so having greater representation allows for a diversity of narratives and experiences to be circulating in a person's mind when they are then engaging in health practice. So absolutely the rhetoric, the language, all of it is so crucial to who can have access to health and what that access looks like when you are doing it.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a very important aspect of this topic. And yeah, totally. Just things as simple as, I know when I was looking for therapy, something that was super important to me was that my therapist was queer, just to understand that perspective. And so, yeah, it's really simple things like that where I think, straight cis people might not consider that as well. One more question I had for you, Dr. Frizz, is I know you're in the process of writing your first book. Is there any intersection in that book with queer mental health or anything you want to talk about the book?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking. Yeah, so my book is tentatively titled Sex Without Subjectivity, a new materialist critique for a radical politics of pleasure. So that's a lot. We don't need to get into all the weeds of the theory going on behind that. But essentially, my book is looking at pleasure activism. So that's groups of health activists who are organizing around sexual pleasure and see pleasure as an important tool for resisting authoritarian power. And I do think that feelings of panic and depression and demoralization that are circulating now, and especially among queer communities, that these are the goals of the attacks that we're seeing now, like those negative feelings, that feeling run down and hopeless and helpless, that's the goal. And so that being the goal of an authoritarian regime, finding pleasure now, no matter how small it is, but finding that pleasure is a huge act of defiance. And so I hope that my book can kind of help support those efforts and shine some more lights on ways to continue to use pleasure as a tool of resistance.
Thank you so much for sharing. I just looked in the chat and someone asked, where can we find that book? I think that also is a good transition into a Q&A, but quickly, if you want to answer that question, do you know where we can find that book when it's released?
Well, you can't find it yet because I am still writing it. But I do have good news that I am working with Ohio State University Press to publish the book. And so I think if all goes well, it will be perhaps ready about next summer, so summer 2027. So I'll be sure to shout it from the rooftops once my baby exists in real life. But for now, it's just a collection of words on my computer.
Perfect. I hope that answers the question for the live watcher. So yeah, let's transition into a little bit of Q&A from our live audience. If we can put the first question on the screen. There we go. Okay. So this is for either of you, whoever wants to chime in. What gives you hope when you think about the future of queer mental health support?
Well, talking about representation and all of those things, I know more and more queer folks who are going into the mental health field or healthcare in general, and are also folks who are in those fields who feel like they can come out, like folks who are 15, 20 years older than I am and who are just now feeling like they can come out. And so I think the increased representation is giving me a lot of hope that we're going to see more folks who are more attuned to the needs of the queer community in these spaces.
I agree with more representation. I definitely have seen that with my own eyes, definitely happening, which is great. I think it's important when talking about hope, it's important to remember that while things seem bad, are bad, it's a very difficult time right now. It is still important to remember the progress that we've made. I often have to remind myself and think about how lucky I am that I'm sitting here. I'm the co-director of the Queer Student Commission at a very large university, and I'm able to do this. Which it's because we're in Seattle. It's a liberal university. Like there are many factors that go into that, and many people don't get this opportunity. But I think it's really important to remember how far we've come, and there are more resources out there than there have ever been before in the past, and it's about finding them and keeping them going.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Let's see if we can have one more question on the screen. Perfect. Okay. What makes a mental health resource truly feel queer affirming rather than just inclusive in name?
Man, what a good question. I think if I were to take a stab at that, I think it comes down to the people who are utilizing the resource and who they are. Like, if the resource is for, say, trans people, do trans people feel affirmed in that space? If it's for lesbians or for cis gay men or trans gay men, does the target population feel fully affirmed and like they are getting what they want out of that resource? So a little bit of it's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, to add on to that, I also think making sure that the resources are formed with not just queer people in mind, but queer people helping create the resource as well. A straight cis person, whoever, is not going to have the full knowledge to create a resource just for queer people without getting input from queer people as well. So knowing that queer people have been a part of the process of creating the resource, I think is also very important.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question from the audience. Let's see here. Okay. How do different aspects of identity intersect with queer mental health experience? And then we have some examples up there in the question as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what you're getting at is intersectionality and some of the different ways that you different vectors of privilege and oppression can manifest differently for different bodies and different experiences. And so absolutely that, so the story that I was talking about, with my experience, this was not necessarily mental health, but the physical health with that physician. It also is an important part of that story that both he and I are white people. And I think that my like eventual, I really am, I promise you, I'm not pregnant. We can move on past this. That was the sort of thing that a white woman can get away with in the doctor's office that a person of color would not be given that kind of benefit of the doubt. And so I think attending to that is an important aspect of it, but it just means that we need even greater diversity in our coalitions for when we're trying to achieve something.
Yeah, I agree completely and don't really have much more to add. I just think, yeah, intersectionality, intersecting identities are always important. So, again, if we're talking about queer mental health resources, there needs to be queer mental health resources specifically for queer people of color, for queer people who are part of a certain religion, etc. Because, again, yeah, like a white cis lesbian is not going to have the same knowledge as a non-white queer person, and it's important to have all identities represented, when talking about mental health and also when providing resources for mental health.
I also want to add on one more thing I was thinking of. My former colleague and friend, Dr. Relina Joseph, just released a book on racial exhaustion. And so she's talking about exactly like this intersection of race and mental health and the conversations around like how people of color can feel so exhausted having to constantly re-educate white friends and colleagues and neighbors about talking about race. And so I think that that's also a plug for the book, for that book, which does exist in real life, Racial Exhaustion by Relina Joseph. But that there's a different layer of sort of mental wellness or mental challenge, mental health struggle that comes from being a person of color in a white supremacist society. So I just wanted to also acknowledge that there are going to be different aspects that are going to be brought to the table for any kind of positionality that's on the margins of society or has been marginalized through concerted efforts.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate this question, actually. I don't want to talk too much, but again, with me being Indigenous and studying American Indian studies, there are aspects of where queer mental health intersects with that. I think just thinking of, there might be mental health resources for trans people, but they might not fully understand what two-spirit means and what that encompasses. And so, yeah, there's totally different aspects there. So thank you for sharing a little bit about that. And we're nearing the end, but I just want to ask if you'd like to share any details about how to stay on top of your work, if you have, any advice for any young queer people watching, just final thoughts.
I can go first. Yeah, I'd just say, I mean, it's said over and over again, but you're not alone. It's very important to reach out, and especially if you're a student at UW on the Seattle campus, there are so many resources right at your fingertips that are for you. They're catered exactly to you, to students. Like I mentioned, the Q Center really, I think, is probably the best resource for queer students on campus, because they provide such a range of opportunities and spaces and things to do. To keep updated with what the Queer Student Commission is doing, follow our Instagram. I mentioned it before, at ASUWQSC. Also, feel free to reach out to me or my co-director at any time. My email is asuwqsc@uw.edu. And also, we have office hours. Both of us have 2 office hours every week. and they're right here. Our office is in the hub. It's in the ASUW Plus suite. It's hub 131P, and the door will just be open, and you can find the actual office hours on our Instagram. But if you choose to come, yeah, the door will be open. You can come in, have a Jolly Rancher because we have a bunch, and yeah, you can just talk to us. You can propose legislation. You can tell us you want to do a certain event. You want to see this happen on campus, whatever. It's our job to listen to you, and we want to listen to you too. And you can also just come to talk or hang. So yeah, we're here to serve the needs of students. So don't be afraid to reach out.
Love that. I would say like my closing thoughts, advice to young people. I heard this so much when I was in college to like get involved, and so it's like, yeah, I get it. I'll like join a club or do some volunteering. But what I mean is those times when you're just like sitting at home and on the couch, maybe you're doom scrolling, and you're thinking, there was that thing that was tonight. Am I gonna go? Oh, I don't know. I'd have to put on pants and go out the door, put on the pants and go out the door and go do the thing. There's so many events out. And so doing and being there in person is so much more, it really, like for me, I'll speak for me that like being in person fills some part of my soul that just like the community and the feeling that I get in person with other people is so important and so valid, and that it really helps to stave off all of the darkness that is surrounding us. It's sort of that like candle of light in the midst of it. And so if you can go be with other people, they can like light your candle and you can light someone else's, and then it's less dark and it's not so lonely. So go do things in person, go be in community. There's a lot of strength and healing going on there.
Awesome. Thank you again, Dr. Frizz and Lila. It was super helpful to hear about your experiences and the work that you're both doing. Yeah, I really appreciate your time, and I'm excited to stay in touch with both of you. And also thank you to everyone who joined us today and took part in the conversation.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
This was great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And then a special thanks to all of our speakers and people who helped behind the scenes, Dr. Gonzalez, Mercy, Dr. Frizz, and Lila, and also all the undergraduates who helped out behind the scenes.